Dice. Dice are synonymous with board games, tabletop role-playing games like D&D, war games. Dice are synonymous with fun, at least most of the time. Sometimes dice can be extremely unfun. In this video, we're going to talk about how a deck of cards can make games way more fun than any old dice can. Roll that intro. Welcome to Corner Case. You're in the hobby corner. I'm your host, your mathematician, and your best friend, Deck. This is a wargaming channel, so the ideas we are discussing today are within the context of wargaming. However, these ideas are applicable outside of wargaming to any tabletop game. In this video, we're going to discuss specifically the statistical differences between dice and cards and some gameplay that is unlocked by using cards instead of dice. We will not be discussing input versus output randomness, which is also a big component of game design and fun, because that topic is pretty big and I think warrants its own video. So where is this all coming from? If you are coming from any other miniature war game or tabletop role-playing game, you are probably accustomed to tossing entire handfuls of dice at a time. However, my favorite miniatures game is Malifaux. It always has been. And in Malifaux, you use a deck of cards instead of dice. So this is kind of like why I started thinking about this topic at all. Now, other games also use cards. Famously, I think lately Moonstone has been catching fire, and Moonstone also uses a deck to RNG. However, I think Malifaux has the most comprehensive use of the deck and the best examples. So we're mostly going to be talking about that. What makes a deck of cards so great when compared to dice? As somebody who has never taken a math class since high school, more than half a lifetime ago, I'm about to model some distributions for y'all. Now, if you are actually good at math, please be nice, I beg you. I'm a designer, aka artist, aka Excel spreadsheet hater. So I'm doing my best here. Haven't taken a math class in like 16 years or something. So for dice, I'm going to use a distribution model here for rolling 2d6. So 2d6 dice is a very common set of dice to use in board games, tabletop role-playing games, and war games. 2d6 is what you roll in Settlers of Catan. 2d6 is what you roll if you're playing Warhammer 40k and you're trying to get a charge off. Let's procrastinate the math a little longer and set the scene. You're a Blood Angels Death Company squad led by Sergeant and you're trying to charge into this Death Guard kill team, aka Alpha Strain, aka I am Alfarius, aka Alpha Legion that infiltrated the wrong Death Guard company at the wrong time. You just deep struck in and you need to roll a 9 to get into combat. Now, let's take a look at the distribution of rolling 2d6. So there are 36 total permutations here. And you can see the shape of the distribution. You can only roll on 2d6. You can't even roll a 1. You can roll a 2 one way, and you can roll 12s one way. You can roll a 7 6 ways. That's 1 6, 2 5, 3 4, 4 3, 5 2, and 6 1. So those are all the ways you can roll a 7. So that comes up the most often in our distribution model, or theoretical distribution model. And what that does, if you look at the chart here, is it gives you 10 viable options out of 36, so 10 out of 36 chance to get this charge off. So the 10 out of 36 is what you would expect theoretically, but that's the problem. First problem is what I believe I've been taught is called probability with replacement. And what this means effectively is that I can pull the same randomly generated number an infinite amount of times, regardless of what the theoretical distribution looks like. So real quick to illustrate this concept, I have this bag here, and inside this bag are a bunch of models. I reach into the bag and oh, look, it's a Mephiston. And guess what? If I put Mephiston back into the bag, I can pull Mephiston out any number of times randomly, as many times as I wish forever, because Mephiston always goes back in the bag, so Mephiston is always an option. So when you roll dice, this is very important. If you roll a 12, that 12 doesn't disappear from the pool of available numbers. You can still roll that 12 over and over and over again. So that's one issue, is despite the theoretical distribution shape, Probability with replacement, I think, is exacerbated by the small sample size. Now let's go back to our Warhammer 40k charge example. How many charges are you really rolling in a game? Are you rolling 10? I think 10 would be like pretty generous in one game if you're rolling 10 charges. I think that's a lot. I think more importantly, like it's not a significant number of charges. So if you're rolling 2d6 and your total number of permutations is 36, like you're not even reaching the full sample size within a single game. So when we're using these like probabilities, the greater sample size you have, I think the closer that looks like the theoretical distribution. But if you have a very small sample size, it's more likely that you get a distribution that looks super wacky. So in a game like 40k, if you're rolling charges, there's no real way for you to look at the probability, the distribution model, and think, well, I'm like probably going to get a 7 or better more than half of the time. So because of the small sample size and probability with replacement, it's not really reliable that you can even think that way. Effectively, it's super, super random. So how is a deck of cards better? If I am only talking about the feeling of playing with a deck of cards instead of dice, the deck of cards feels strategic, it feels tactical. You feel like you're making good decisions because the deck kind of makes you feel like you're managing your luck as a resource. Now, how and why? In order to answer that, let's round out our statistics talk. Let's do another distribution thing. Here is your distribution for a deck of cards. You have 13 values and 4 suits. And what you immediately see is a few things. First, there is a finite number of results. Next, there is an equal chance to pull any individual value or any individual card. So already this is a massive difference from the dice. Let's look at what this actually means in practice. So our values of 1 to 13 are not too different from our values of 2 to 12 when rolling our charge. So let's continue on with our Blood Angels charging Death Guard example and just swap the dice with this deck of cards. What happens? Will Sergeant make his charge or not? In Malifaux, when you flip a card, it goes into a discard pile. So now we're in a situation that is probability without replacement. So if we apply this methodology to the charge roll in Warhammer 40k, Sergeant flips a card off the top of the deck. What happens? You need a 9 or better, so your chances are 20 out of 52 eligible results, and you flip a card off the top of the deck. Let's say that you fail. You flip like a 2, but you needed a 9. Now, they fail, but you have another squad of intercessors led by a sergeant of a better name, and they have to get a charge off. Well, now, rather than chances of 20 out of 52 to make their charge, because you already pulled that 2 out of the deck and it's not going back in, now your chances are 20 out of 51. So your chances are actually better because of the lack of replacement. And on top of that, you have the information of knowing that one of your bad cards is out of your deck. So no replacement has a really big effect on your subsequent tries and allows you to make more strategic decisions knowing what your probability actually looks like because of no replacement. So I think that pretty succinctly outlines the statistical differences between dice and cards in a gaming context. It feels way more tactical, way more strategic, knowing that you can not manipulate necessarily, but at least think through your luck in a reliable way. Now let's talk a little bit about gameplay. How does replacing dice with cards unlock different playstyles within miniature games? Again, I'll be using Malifaux for most of my examples, but Magic the Gathering is also a great game that has a lot of mechanics that use cards, and there can be some examples from there. So one cool set of mechanics from Malifaux that come from the use of cards are the control hand and the cheat fate mechanics. So let's take a quick look at our distribution again. At the beginning of a round of Malifaux, you draw 6 cards. So immediately 6 of the cards within your distribution are gone, and you know exactly what they are because they're in your hand, which gives you more information about your luck. At base, most card flips in Malifaux start as a straight flip. If you flip a straight flip, which means flip 1 card off the top of your deck, you are allowed to what's called cheat fate, which means pulling a card from your hand and playing it in place of the card that was just flipped. That means you can actually guarantee results. There are very few mechanics within the game that allow you to draw cards mid-round, so your control hand is a really important resource for guaranteeing results. This is one of the few mechanics I've seen and enjoyed in miniature games that allows you to do that. And so the baseline of Malifaux is if you're a good resource manager, you can basically guarantee results your entire turn. Let's say you have 112 in your hand. Well, you got to save that 112. When are you going to use it? That's basically a guaranteed success. Let's say that you drew a hand of all garbage, like 1s and 2s and 4s. Well, you're probably not using your control hand to guarantee results, but that at base means that you have a good understanding of your distribution. You know that those cards are out of your deck, and so your luck is going to be that much better for the rest of the turn. Your RNG really becomes like this cool metagame once you swap out the dice for a deck and introduce mechanics like this that rely on the deck. Now that I've talked about how RNG, how luck can be a resource that you manage because it's this deck of cards, that all of a sudden unlocks playstyles that are controlling. So in Magic the Gathering, you can play a control playstyle. You know, controlling playstyles, for those of you who don't play Magic, you literally control the pace of the game, usually by denying your opponent's ability to play. And that can be done in different ways, but ultimately it's by denying them resources in one way or another. Now, in many war games, let's take 40K again as an example because it is the most popular one. The main resources you're managing are wounds, number of attacks, command points, but effectively, the resources that matter are the number of attacks and shots and the number of wounds. So kind of like the way you're controlling in a game of Warhammer 40K would be, for example, a very tanky army. One that has a lot or high quality of wounds could be considered controlling. You know, you're making your opponent's shots or attacks worse, so you're making them waste resources or spend more resources. Another type of control might be like you play like an alpha strike. So by just taking 30% or 50% of an army off the table in the first turn, you're denying them resources to play. So those are the types of way you play control in other games. But in Malifaux, or other games where you play cards, you actually do unlock the ability to play control in different ways. You can deny that resource. So I told you that in Malifaux, the baseline is actually that you can guarantee results. But now that you play cards that can guarantee those results, you can deny that from your opponent. So one example is this mechanic that's called terrifying. The terrifying mechanic means if I target this model that has terrifying with an attack, I actually have to take a test. What does that mean? Let's put it into context. So I have Perdita Ortega here. I'm showing her card, and I have the Malosaurus Rex here. This isn't too crunchy, I promise. So it says Terrifying 12. So if Perdita is trying to shoot down this Malosaurus Rex, she has to take a Willpower 12 test. You see that her value is 6, so I need to flip a 6 or better. This basically means that her chances of flipping a 6 or better are, in a full deck, a little bit better than half, but depending on where you are in terms of what cards are left in your hand, what cards are left in your deck, flipping that 6 might not be that easy. And what happens if you fail? That means you're wasting an activation to basically fail an attack. So if you're going to target that Malosaurus Rex, you want to make sure that you have the card in your hand just in case you fail. And if you have to spend that card, what if that card is higher than you wanted to? Then you're relying on luck if you start to run out of cards. So there are a lot of mechanics inside of Malifaux that just force the opponent to rely on strict luck. It strips their ability to guarantee results, which is the baseline within that game. And that's one way that you play a control game in a miniatures game. And I haven't seen that in any other game. Now, don't get me wrong, you can play control in different games in different ways. In Infinity, like just camo spam is a pretty cool way you can play control, and the way you play around that is pretty different as well. But Malifaux is my favorite example of just a diverse set of mechanics that all encourage a controlling playstyle. You can play aggressively, you can play a control style, and you get that because of the cards. Different factions have different ways of controlling as well. So if you're familiar with Magic, there's looting and rummaging effects that you can do. There are effects where you can use the top card of your discard pile, or you can look at the top card of your deck. So these are all ways of manipulating your luck resource that aren't just like throwing more rerolls into the game. And like I said, there are plenty of other mechanics that encourage this controlling playstyle, but that's probably for another video. I think I'll just make a how to play control in a miniatures game video. But that was today's video on why I love a deck of cards instead of dice. It makes the gameplay just feel so much more strategic, so much more tactical. It makes your luck more of a decision rather than just something random that happens. It's so cool. I think not enough people are talking about this, and I wanted y'all to understand how it works. For all of you math people, please don't hate me, I beg you. I actually Googled stats for this video. That's not who I'm supposed to be. I went to anti-math school. You have to understand, design school is literally anti-math school, and I was watching statistic videos for like days to get this video out to you guys. All that to say, please like and subscribe. We're so desperate. We beg you. Join us on Facebook, the Discord, Patreon if you would like to. Leave snake eyes in the comments if you liked or disliked this video, and we'll see you next time.
Please like and subscribe. We've been through enough.